Monaco, December 3rd, 1999. Shortly after 4 in the morning, smoke begins to fill the penthouse atop La Belle Époque, one of the most exclusive addresses in the world's wealthiest microstate. Inside, a 67-year-old man retreats to a reinforced room designed to withstand almost any threat. The walls are armored. The door is blast-resistant. The security system cost millions to install. None of it will save him. By dawn, Edmond Safra will be dead. So will his nurse, a woman named Vivian Torrente, who followed him into that fortified chamber. They will die not from bullets or bombs, but from smoke. They will die waiting for rescue that arrives too late. They will die in a room built specifically to keep them alive. Edmond Safra was not an ordinary man. He controlled a banking empire that stretched across 4 continents. His personal fortune exceeded $3 billion. He had sold his life's work just months earlier in the largest all-cash acquisition in banking history. He employed a private security force trained by Israeli intelligence. He lived behind walls that would shame most embassies. And yet someone got to him. The official story would eventually point to a single culprit, an American nurse who set a small fire to stage a heroic rescue and watched it spiral beyond control. A tragedy born of vanity and stupidity, nothing more. But the official story has never satisfied everyone. In the weeks before his death, Safra had cooperated with the FBI on an investigation that threatened powerful people in Moscow. He had made enemies at one of America's largest corporations. He had married a woman whose previous husband died under circumstances that still generate whispers in certain circles. This is the story of a man who built a fortress and died inside it. A man who trusted almost no one and was betrayed by someone he barely knew. A man whose death, 25 years later, still raises questions that have never been fully answered. Before we start, please subscribe now to support me and like the video if you enjoy this. I also love a comment if you have anything on your heart. Now, let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Fortress. The Principality of Monaco covers less than 1 square mile. Nestled between the French Alps and the Mediterranean Sea, it has no income tax, no army worth mentioning, and more millionaires per capita than anywhere else on Earth. It also has more police officers per resident than any nation in the world. Cameras monitor virtually every street corner. Crime, the authorities like to boast, simply does not happen here. Edmond Safra chose Monaco precisely because of this reputation. After decades of building banks in Geneva, New York, and São Paulo, he wanted somewhere safe to spend his final years. His health was failing. Parkinson's disease had weakened his body and sharpened his fears. He needed a sanctuary. He found it at 17 Avenue d'Ostende. La Belle Époque was not merely an apartment building. The structure housed the Monaco branch of Safra's own Republic National Bank on its lower floors, with his private residence occupying the top 2 stories. The living quarters spread across nearly 11,000 square feet, commanding views of the harbour where super yachts bobbed at anchor. The space contained multiple bedrooms, formal reception rooms, and accommodations for the rotating medical staff who attended him around the clock. But the luxury was secondary to the protection. Every window was reinforced. Every entrance required codes and keys. Cameras recorded every corridor. A sophisticated alarm system linked directly to Monaco's police headquarters. The master bedroom suite included a panic room with armored walls, independent ventilation, and communications equipment. If danger ever came, Safra could retreat behind barriers designed to resist armed assault for hours. He employed 7 caregivers to manage his medical needs. He maintained a team of bodyguards, many with backgrounds in Israeli intelligence services. Visitors were screened. Deliveries were inspected. The building itself was monitored by bank personnel on the floors below. By late 1999, Edmund Safra had created perhaps the most protected private residence in Europe. The man who had spent his career safeguarding other people's fortunes had spared no expense safeguarding himself. On the night of December 2nd, everything appeared normal. Safra dined early, as was his habit. His wife Lily occupied her own suite on the opposite end of the apartment. 2 attendants were scheduled for the overnight shift: Vivian Torrente, an experienced member of the medical team, and a newer hire who had joined the household just months earlier. Around 4:30 in the morning, something went wrong. The first indication came from the building's fire alarm. Smoke had been detected somewhere in the upper floors. Within minutes, Monaco's emergency services received calls reporting a possible break-in. An American voice, breathless and panicked, claimed that armed intruders had entered the residence. The caller said he had been stabbed fighting them off. Police arrived to find chaos. A man stumbled through the lobby, bleeding from wounds to his stomach and thigh. He wore medical scrubs. He gasped that masked men were still inside, that his employer was in danger, that someone needed to get upstairs immediately. But getting upstairs proved difficult. The same safeguards designed to keep intruders out now complicated the rescue effort. Codes were needed. Keys were missing. The man who knew the layout best, Safra's chief of protection, was detained and handcuffed by police, who did not recognize him. Precious minutes vanished while officers tried to determine what was happening and how to reach the victims. Inside the apartment, smoke was spreading. Safra and Torrente had retreated to the reinforced bathroom attached to his dressing room. They believed armed attackers were hunting them. They did not know that no intruders existed. They did not know the fire had started in a wastebasket. They only knew that smoke was seeping under the door, and they could not get out. Torrente made phone calls from inside that room. Her voice, captured in recordings, grew increasingly desperate. She begged friends to contact the police. She pleaded for someone to hurry. She did not understand why rescue was taking so long. The answer was simple and devastating. Police had committed their resources to hunting armed assailants who did not exist. Firefighters hesitated to breach the reinforced doors without confirmation of what waited on the other side. The elaborate defensive measures that were supposed to protect Edmund Safra had transformed his home into a trap. More than 2 hours passed between the first alarm and the moment rescuers finally reached the bathroom. They found 2 bodies. Edmund Safra and Vivian Torrente had died of smoke inhalation, overcome by fumes while waiting behind armored walls for help that came too late. The 67-year-old banker was still wearing his pajamas. His caregiver was still clutching her mobile phone. Lily Safra had escaped from her side of the apartment. The intruders that everyone had been searching for were never found. By sunrise, Monaco had its first major murder investigation in years. The initial suspects ranged from Russian organized crime to Middle Eastern terrorist cells to shadowy figures connected to Safra's banking operations. The billionaire had cooperated with law enforcement agencies investigating serious people. Perhaps someone had decided to silence him. But within days, the investigation would take a very different turn. The wounded man in the lobby, the one who had reported masked intruders and claimed to have fought them off, would change his story completely. There were no intruders. There never had been. He had set the fire himself. He had stabbed his own body to make the attack seem real. His name was Ted Maher. He had worked for Edmund Safra for less than 5 months, and his explanation for why he had done it would prove almost as disturbing as the deaths themselves. Chapter 2: The Empire Builder. To understand why the fire in Monaco made headlines around the world, you first need to understand the man who died in it. Edmund Safra was not simply rich. Plenty of men are rich. He was something rarer, a banker whom other bankers trusted with their own money. In an industry built on fine print and legal armies, Safra operated on handshakes and reputation. His word was worth more than most men's contracts. That reputation had taken 3 generations to build, and it made him one of the most powerful financiers of the 20th century. The Safras had been in the money business since the Ottoman Empire, financing trade routes between Aleppo, Beirut, and Alexandria. Edmund's father Jacob ran a small bank in Lebanon, where the family's name meant more than any government guarantee. When political instability threatened their future, Jacob sent his teenage son to Milan, with little more than a few contacts and the lessons learned in the coffeehouses of Beirut. The boy was 15. He spoke no Italian. Within a few years, he had multiplied his small stake through shrewd gold trades that veteran financiers had overlooked. That pattern would define his career, arriving somewhere as an outsider, studying the terrain, finding opportunities others missed, and building something that lasted. In 1956, at 24 years old, Edmund Safra opened the Trade Development Bank in Geneva. Switzerland offered discretion, stability, and access to wealthy clients who valued both. He started with capital of roughly $1 million. The methods were old-fashioned even then. He knew his depositors personally. He avoided the speculative instruments that Wall Street was beginning to embrace. He focused obsessively on one thing, making sure the money was there when clients wanted it back. The approach was unfashionable. It was also extraordinarily effective. By the 1980s, Trade Development Bank had grown to $5 billion in assets. Safra had not achieved this through advertising or aggressive expansion. He had achieved it through referrals, one wealthy client telling another that this quiet Lebanese banker could be trusted absolutely. His depositors included old European money, Latin American industrialists, and Middle Eastern royalty. They came to Safra because they knew their secrets were safe and their funds were safer. But Geneva was only the beginning. In 1966, Safra founded the Republic National Bank of New York. The American operation took a different approach. Instead of catering exclusively to the ultra-wealthy, Republic built a retail network serving immigrant communities, people who understood what it meant to need a bank you could trust. The institution grew steadily, branch by branch, relationship by relationship. By the 1990s, Republic operated 80 locations across the New York metropolitan area, making it the third largest branch network in the region, behind only Citigroup and Chase Manhattan. He expanded into Luxembourg in 1988, establishing Safra Republic Holdings as a European hub for private banking. The structure was complex, spanning multiple continents and regulatory jurisdictions. But the philosophy remained simple. Protect the depositors. Know your clients. Never risk what you cannot afford to lose. By the early 1990s, Edmund Safra's personal fortune was estimated at $2.5 billion. His banks held many times that amount. He had become one of the most significant private bankers in the world, mentioned in the same breath as the old Rothschild and Warburg dynasties. And he had done it without ever truly being accepted by the financial establishment. Safra remained an outsider in ways that mattered. He was Sephardic in a world dominated by Ashkenazi Jewish banking families. He was Lebanese in an industry suspicious of Middle Eastern money. He was secretive in an era when publicity was becoming currency. Wall Street did not know what to make of him. The old European banks viewed him with a mixture of respect and wariness. He spoke 6 languages and seemed equally comfortable in Geneva, São Paulo, and Manhattan, which meant he never fully belonged to any of them. This outsider status made him careful. It also made him enemies. When you control billions of dollars and operate across borders that governments struggle to police, powerful people pay attention. Some want to do business with you. Others want to destroy you. Edmond Safra would encounter both in the years ahead, and the encounters would shape the final chapter of his life. But in 1999, as he lay trapped in his Monaco bathroom while smoke seeped under the door, none of his wealth could save him. The man who had spent 50 years building institutions designed to protect assets could not protect himself. The empire he built would survive him. The questions surrounding his death would prove far more difficult to resolve. Chapter 3: The Vendetta. In 1983, Edmond Safra did something that surprised the financial world. He sold his beloved trade development bank to American Express for approximately $450 million. The deal made strategic sense on paper. American Express wanted to expand into private banking. Safra wanted liquidity and, perhaps, a rest. He had spent nearly 3 decades building the Geneva institution from nothing. The sale would make him extraordinarily wealthy and free him from the daily pressures of running a global operation. There was one condition that would prove fateful. Safra agreed not to compete in the banking business for a period of years. He honored the agreement, but retirement did not suit him. Safra was 51 years old, healthy, and constitutionally incapable of sitting idle while others managed money. Within 2 years, he had returned to the business through Republic New York Corporation, arguing that the non-compete applied only to Swiss operations. American Express did not see it that way. To the executives in Manhattan, Safra's return felt like betrayal. They had paid nearly $500 million for his expertise and client relationships. Now he was using both to build a competing institution. Worse, some of his former clients were following him to the new venture. The corporate humiliation was profound. What happened next would become one of the ugliest episodes in modern corporate history. Beginning in 1988, stories began appearing in newspapers and magazines linking Edmond Safra to criminal enterprises. The allegations were sensational. One report connected him to Latin American drug cartels. Another suggested his banks had laundered money for the Iran-Contra scandal. A third implied ties to organized crime. The stories shared certain characteristics. They cited anonymous sources. They offered no documentary evidence. And they appeared in publications that had never previously shown interest in Swiss banking. Safra knew immediately that something coordinated was happening. The allegations were not random journalism. They were an orchestrated campaign designed to destroy his reputation, the very foundation upon which his entire career had been built. He hired investigators of his own. What they discovered was remarkable. The smear campaign traced back to American Express. The company had retained private intelligence operatives who planted false stories with journalists. They had created fictitious sources and fabricated connections. The operation was sophisticated, well-funded, and deliberately designed to ruin a man who had committed no crime beyond returning to his profession. Safra responded with overwhelming legal force. His attorneys filed suit. His lawyers assembled methodical, devastating evidence documenting every planted story, every false source, every payment to operatives. American Express faced a choice: fight the allegations in court, where the full scope of their campaign would become public record, or settle quietly. They chose neither. In 1989, American Express issued a public apology. The company admitted that individuals acting on its behalf had spread false information about Edmond Safra. They acknowledged that the allegations of criminal conduct were baseless, and they agreed to pay $8 million to charities of Safra's choosing. $8 million meant nothing to a company that size. The admission meant everything. Major corporations do not publicly apologize for defaming competitors. The statement was an extraordinary humiliation, covered extensively in the business press. Safra had not merely survived the attack. He had forced one of the largest companies in the world to admit, on the record, that they had tried to destroy him through lies. His victory was complete. But it changed him. Before the American Express affair, Safra had understood that success created jealousy. After it, he understood something darker. Major institutions would spend millions to annihilate him if they believed it served their interests. The rules of civilized competition did not apply. The only protection was vigilance, documentation, and the resources to fight back. He became more guarded. His security arrangements, always careful, grew more elaborate. His willingness to engage with the business establishment diminished. He had seen what they were capable of when they felt threatened. This lesson would prove relevant in the years ahead. The American Express vendetta was not the last time powerful forces would target Edmund Safra, but it established a pattern that investigators would later find significant. The man who died in Monaco had spent decades accumulating enemies. Some he knew about, others operated in shadows he could not penetrate. Chapter 4. The Gilded Lily. Edmund Safra was not the only figure in that Monaco penthouse whose past invited scrutiny. His wife Lily had lived a life that tabloids found irresistible and investigators found curious. She was born Lily Watkins in 1934 in the small Brazilian town of Porto Alegre. The details of her early years remain sketchy, perhaps deliberately so. What is clear is that she possessed beauty, ambition, and an understanding of how wealth operates that would serve her well across 5 decades. Her first marriage, to a minor Argentine businessman, ended quickly and left little trace. Her second would prove far more consequential. Alfredo Monteverde had built a fortune through Ponto Frio, one of Brazil's largest retail chains. He was wealthy, established, and significantly older than his young wife. They married in the early 1960s. By 1969, Lily had given him 3 children and secured her position in São Paulo's elite circles. Then, Alfredo Monteverde died. The official ruling was suicide. He had been found with gunshot wounds in circumstances the authorities deemed self-inflicted. His family did not believe it. The Monteverdes insisted that Alfredo had no reason to take his own life. His business was thriving, his health was sound, his spirits had been good. They pointed to inconsistencies in the investigation. They questioned why a man would choose such a violent end when nothing in his behavior suggested despair. Their suspicions focused on Lily. No charges were ever filed. No evidence directly implicated her. But the whispers followed her for the rest of her life, resurfacing whenever journalists dug into her background. She denied any involvement, and legally the matter was closed. Yet the Monteverde family never accepted the official verdict, and their doubts became part of the permanent record surrounding Lily Watkins Monteverde. She did not remain a widow for long. Her third husband was another wealthy Brazilian, a brief union that produced no children and generated little attention. It was her 4th marriage that would define her public identity. Edmund Safra and Lily met in the mid-1970s. The circumstances of their introduction vary depending on who tells the story. What is certain is that by 1976, they were married. She was 42, he was 44. Neither had children from previous marriages who might complicate the union. For Edmund, Lily offered something his fortune could not buy: social grace. She understood how to host dignitaries, which artists to patronize, how to transform a house into a setting worthy of magazine covers. Their homes in Monaco, London, Geneva, and New York became showcases of taste and discretion. She cultivated relationships with museum directors, charity boards, and the European aristocracy. If Edmund was the engine of their wealth, Lily was its most visible ambassador. For Lily, Edmund offered legitimacy. Whatever shadows clung to her past, marriage to one of the world's most respected bankers provided a shield of respectability. The Safra name opened doors that Monteverde money never could. They appeared devoted to each other. Friends described genuine affection between them, a partnership that functioned smoothly despite Edmund's obsessive work habits and deteriorating health. As his Parkinson's disease progressed through the 1990s, Lily managed an expanding staff of nurses, therapists, and household employees. She oversaw his care with the same attention to detail she applied to their dinner parties. By 1999, they had been married for 23 years. Edmund's condition had worsened considerably. He required round-the-clock medical attention and rarely appeared in public. The Monaco penthouse had become less a home than a medical facility, staffed by rotating nurses who monitored his every need. Lily occupied a separate suite within the residence. This arrangement was practical. Edmund's care required constant attention that would have disrupted her sleep. The medical equipment, the night nurses, the medications administered at odd hours, sharing a bedroom made little sense. Many couples in similar circumstances maintained separate quarters. But when the fire broke out in the early hours of December 3rd, the arrangement took on different significance. Lily escaped from her side of the penthouse without injury. Her husband died in his. The footage from security cameras that might have documented exactly what happened that night was never recovered. Guards who normally patrolled the building had been given the evening off. These details would fuel speculation for years to come. Lily Safra inherited the bulk of her husband's estate. She devoted much of it to philanthropy, donating hundreds of millions to medical research, education, and the arts before her death in July 2022. Her charitable work was genuine and substantial. It did not silence the questions. Chapter 5. Dangerous Connections. The American Express vendetta had taught Edmund Safra that corporations would spend millions to destroy a competitor. What he discovered in the 1990s taught him something worse. There were people in the world who did not bother with smear campaigns. They simply made problems disappear. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, it created one of the largest transfers of wealth in human history. State assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars passed into private hands almost overnight. The men who seized these assets, oil fields, aluminum smelters, telecommunications networks, needed somewhere to put their new fortunes. They needed discretion, and they needed access to Western markets. Safra's institutions offered all three. Republic National Bank of New York and its affiliated entities had built their reputation serving clients who valued privacy above all else. The infrastructure that worked for Latin American industrialists and Middle Eastern royalty worked equally well for the new Russian elite. Money flowed through accounts in New York, Geneva, and Luxembourg. The amounts were staggering. Not all of this money was clean. In the Russia of the 1990s, the distinction between legitimate business and organized crime was often meaningless. Oligarchs who controlled billion-dollar enterprises employed the same enforcers, paid the same bribes, and eliminated the same obstacles as traditional mafia structures. Violence was a standard business practice. Contract killings were so common in Moscow that newspapers ran tallies like sports scores. Safra found himself in an impossible position. His institutions held accounts that generated enormous fees. Some of those accounts almost certainly contained proceeds from corruption, extortion, or worse. Closing them meant losing revenue and making dangerous enemies. Keeping them meant potential complicity in crimes he could not fully understand. In 1998, he made a decision that would define the final year of his life. Safra contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He provided information about suspicious transactions flowing through accounts connected to Russian nationals. The details he shared would eventually contribute to one of the largest money laundering investigations in American history. At the center of the scandal was the Bank of New York, not Safra's institutions. But the connections were tangled. Investigators traced approximately $4.8 billion that had moved through Bank of New York accounts. Money that included a significant portion of an International Monetary Fund loan intended to stabilize the Russian economy. The funds had been diverted, laundered, and scattered across the globe. Russian government officials were implicated. So were organized crime figures with ties to the Kremlin. Safra had helped expose this network. In doing so, he had made himself a threat to people who operated beyond the reach of American subpoenas. Those who controlled post-Soviet Russia did not respond to lawsuits the way American corporations did. They did not hire lawyers and issue denials. When someone threatened their interests, that person often suffered accidents, car bombs, poisonings, falls from windows. The methods varied. The outcomes did not. Whether Safra fully understood the danger he had placed himself in remains unclear. He was accustomed to enemies who fought with planted newspaper stories and courtroom battles. The Russian networks operated by different rules entirely. They had no public relations concerns. They faced no shareholder accountability. They answered to no one except the men above them, and those men valued loyalty and silence above all else. By late 1999, Edmund Safra had accumulated a remarkable collection of adversaries. A major American corporation had already tried to destroy his reputation through an elaborate disinformation operation. His wife's past contained unresolved questions that periodically resurfaced in the press. And now he had inserted himself into an investigation that threatened some of the most dangerous people on Earth. He was also dying. The Parkinson's disease that had plagued him for years was advancing. His movements were increasingly limited. He depended on a rotating staff of caregivers who managed his medications, his meals, his daily existence. The fortress he had built in Monaco was designed to keep threats out. It had not been designed to keep him alive if something went wrong inside. Safra died approximately 18 months after he first contacted the FBI about Russian money laundering. Investigators would later examine whether this timing was coincidental. They never reached a definitive conclusion. Chapter 6. The Final Deal. By 1999, Edmund Safra had decided to do something he had never done before. He was going to walk away. The decision was partly medical. His Parkinson's disease had progressed to the point where daily management of a global empire was becoming impossible. The tremors, the fatigue, the cognitive fog that accompanied his worst days. These were not conditions suited to running institutions that held other people's fortunes. He had spent 50 years building a reputation for reliability. He would not let illness tarnish it. The decision was also strategic. Safra understood consolidation. The financial world was changing. Smaller private operations were being absorbed by massive global conglomerates. The personal relationships that had built his career were giving way to algorithmic trading and institutional anonymity. He could fight the tide, or he could sell at the peak. He chose to sell. HSBC, the British-based giant with roots in Hong Kong, emerged as the buyer. The negotiations were complex, spanning multiple jurisdictions and regulatory bodies. Safra's holdings included Republic New York Corporation, Safra Republic Holdings in Luxembourg, and various affiliated entities across 3 continents. Untangling the ownership structures took months. The final price was $10.3 billion in cash. Financial journalists struggled to contextualize the figure. It was the largest cash acquisition of any financial institution in history. Safra, who had started with borrowed capital in a small Geneva office 4 decades earlier, was selling out for more than the gross domestic product of many nations. The Lebanese immigrant who spoke 6 languages and trusted no one completely had built something that one of the world's largest corporations considered worth $10 billion. Safra and HSBC announced the agreement in May 1999. Completion was expected by the end of the year or early 2000. Safra would remain involved during a transition period, helping HSBC integrate his client relationships and institutional knowledge. After that, he planned to retire fully. He and Lily would divide their time between Monaco, their villa in the south of France, and perhaps occasional visits to New York. He would focus on philanthropy. He would manage his health. He would, for the first time in half a century, stop working. That future never arrived. On December 3rd, 1999, with the HSBC transaction still in its final stages, Edmond Safra died in his Monaco residence. He was 67 years old. The deal closed without him, his estate collecting the proceeds he would never spend. Many observers found the timing remarkable. For decades, Safra had operated at the center of networks that included controversial clients, intelligence agencies, and shadowy financial flows. He had made enemies in American boardrooms and, more recently, in the corridors of post-Soviet power. Yet he had survived all of it. The American Express vendetta had failed. The Russian entanglements had produced no visible consequences. He was weeks away from completing the largest transaction of his life and vanishing into comfortable obscurity. Then he burned to death in one of the most secure residential buildings in Europe. Those who believed in coincidence saw an elderly man with a debilitating illness who died tragically in an accidental fire. Those who did not believe in coincidence saw something else entirely. A man with powerful enemies. A transaction worth $10 billion. A death that occurred at precisely the moment when killing him would still matter, before he faded into irrelevance, before his knowledge became stale, before the deal closed and the networks dissolved. Investigators would eventually attribute his death to the actions of a single disturbed employee. Many people accepted that conclusion. Others found it difficult to believe that Edmond Safra, after everything he had survived, died because of one man acting alone. His killer had worked for him for less than 5 months. Chapter 7. The Nurse. Ted Maher got the job through a stroke of luck that would later seem like fate. In the spring of 1999, while working at the neonatal unit of Columbia Medical Center in New York, Maher found a camera left behind in a discharged patient's room. Rather than ignore it, he developed the film and tracked down the owners. The camera belonged to Laura and Harry Slatkin, who were overjoyed to recover the first photographs of their newborn twins. Harry Slatkin happened to be connected to the Safra family through his mother-in-law, Adriana Elia, who was Lily Safra's stepdaughter. A recommendation followed. Within weeks, Maher was interviewing for a position on Edmond Safra's private medical team. He was 41 years old, deeply in debt, and facing mounting legal bills from a custody battle with his ex-wife over his oldest son. A hospital strike loomed at Columbia. The timing of the Safra opportunity could not have been better. His background made him attractive to the household. Maher had served in the United States Army Special Forces during the 1970s and 80s. The Safras liked the idea of a nurse who could double as an informal protector, someone with both medical training and the physical capability to respond to threats. After his military service, Maher had earned nursing degrees from Dutchess County Community College and Pace University, eventually specializing in neonatal care. The combination of combat experience and clinical credentials was exactly what they wanted. The contract offered $600 per day. For Maher, who had been earning roughly $60,000 annually at the hospital, the salary was staggering. It meant more than $200,000 per year, enough to solve every financial problem he faced. There was one condition. He would have to leave for Monaco immediately. He accepted in early August 1999. The household he entered operated unlike any workplace he had known. Edmund Safra required constant medical supervision for his advanced Parkinson's disease. A team of 7 or 8 nurses rotated through shifts, ensuring that qualified caregivers were present around the clock. The penthouse at La Belle Époque functioned as both a residence and a medical facility, with medication schedules, monitoring protocols, and documentation requirements that demanded precision and consistency. Maher initially split his time between New York and Monaco, but by late autumn, he had relocated to the Principality full-time. He was assigned night shifts, the least desirable rotation, the hours when nothing happened and no one important was watching. He had been in Monaco for approximately 6 weeks when everything fell apart. The problem was not his clinical competence. The problem was everything else. Sonia Herkrath, the head nurse, had taken an immediate dislike to him. She considered Maher another temporary hire who had gotten into the family's good graces through a lucky break rather than professional merit. According to Maher, she deliberately provided him with incorrect information, causing mistakes that reflected poorly on his performance. She altered his schedule between day and night shifts with little notice, keeping him off balance and unable to establish any rhythm. Whether her hostility was real or imagined, Maher believed he was being sabotaged. Those who worked alongside him saw a man who craved recognition he had not earned. He told stories about his Special Forces service that colleagues found difficult to verify and occasionally implausible. He positioned himself as more capable and more experienced than his brief tenure justified. When he felt overlooked, he made sure people noticed his displeasure. The gap between how Ted Maher perceived himself and how others perceived him was considerable. By late November, he had grown convinced that his position was in jeopardy. The generous salary that had rescued him from financial ruin now felt precarious. He feared that Herkrath was maneuvering to have him dismissed, that his mistakes were being catalogued, that the opportunity of a lifetime was slipping away before he could secure it. A different person might have worked harder, kept quiet, and waited for circumstances to improve. Ted Maher devised a plan. The logic, such as it was, made a terrible kind of sense to him. If the Safras faced a threat, and he was the one who saved them, everything would change. The doubters would be silenced. His value would be obvious. He would transform from the newest and least trusted member of the team into the hero who had protected the family when it mattered most. On the night of December 2nd, 1999, Maher was scheduled at the last minute to work the overnight shift. Edmund Safra was sleeping in his medical suite. Lily Safra was in her separate quarters. The other caregiver on duty was Vivian Torrente, one of the senior nurses who had served the family for years and who represented everything Maher believed was working against him. The building was quiet. The security systems were armed. Nothing suggested that anything unusual would occur. What happened next would unfold over approximately 18 minutes. The events that Ted Maher set in motion during that window would kill 2 people, destroy his own future, and generate questions that have never been fully answered. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted the Safras to see him the way he saw himself. Instead, he became a killer. Chapter 8. 18 minutes. The sequence of events that killed Edmund Safra began sometime after 4:30 in the morning on December 3rd, 1999. Ted Maher was alone in the nursing station when he made his decision. The apartment was quiet. Edmund Safra was sleeping in his medical suite. Lily Safra was in her separate quarters on the opposite end of the residence. The only other staff member present was Vivian Torrente, one of the senior nurses, who was monitoring the equipment near Safra's room. Maher took out his switchblade and cut himself twice. The first wound was to his thigh. The second was to his stomach. Neither cut was deep enough to kill him, but both produced the kind of bleeding that would look convincing. He needed injuries that appeared serious. He needed to look like a man who had fought for his life. Then he went to find Vivian Torrente. His story was simple and terrifying. Two masked intruders had broken into the apartment. They had attacked him with knives. He had fought them off, but they were still somewhere in the residence. Torrente needed to get Safra to safety immediately. Maher handed her his cell phone so she could call for help, while he went to alert the authorities. Torrente did not question the story. There was no reason to. The Safra household operated under constant awareness that powerful people might want to harm their employer. Edmund Safra had enemies in corporate boardrooms and in the corridors of post-Soviet power. An assassination attempt was not implausible. It was the scenario they had prepared for. She woke Safra and helped him to the secure dressing room adjacent to his bedroom. The space had been designed as a refuge, a reinforced area where the family could shelter during exactly this kind of emergency. Torrente locked the door behind them. They believed they were safe now, protected by steel and concrete, waiting for rescue that would surely arrive within minutes. Maher, meanwhile, returned to the nursing station. His plan required an alarm, something that would bring police and firefighters rushing to the building. He gathered toilet paper and placed it in a wastebasket. He struck a match. The flames were only meant to trigger the smoke detectors. A small fire, quickly contained, enough to summon emergency responders who would arrive to find a bleeding nurse who had heroically fought off assassins. They would discover Edmund Safra safely protected in his secure room. The grateful billionaire would recognize Maher's courage. The doubters on the staff would be silenced forever. That was the fantasy. Reality took approximately 18 minutes to destroy it. The fire refused to stay contained. Flames spread to nearby materials, then to furnishings, then to the walls. Smoke began filling the corridors with a speed that Maher had never anticipated. By the time he understood his mistake, the situation was already beyond salvage. Bleeding from his wounds and increasingly faint, he stumbled downstairs to the lobby. When police arrived, he told them the same story he had told Torrente: armed intruders, an attack. His employer trapped somewhere above. The officers believed him. What followed was a rescue operation designed to save lives that instead guaranteed 2 people would die. Police treated the building as an active crime scene, with dangerous assailants still inside. They cleared the structure methodically, room by room, searching for attackers who existed only in Maher's fabrication. Firefighters held back, waiting for confirmation that the area was secure. Every protocol designed to protect first responders from armed criminals now worked to delay their arrival at the one place where people were actually dying. Edmund Safra's chief of security arrived and tried to help. He had keys to the apartment. He knew the layout. He could have led rescuers directly to the dressing room where his employer was trapped. Instead, the police detained him. They handcuffed the one person capable of saving Safra's life and held him while precious minutes vanished. Inside the sealed room, Safra and Torrente waited. The refuge that was meant to protect them had become a death chamber. Smoke seeped through ventilation systems and under door frames. The reinforced walls that kept intruders out now prevented fresh air from entering. The room filled slowly with toxic fumes, while its occupants made increasingly desperate phone calls begging for help that would not come in time. Safra was 67 years old and weakened by advanced Parkinson's disease. His body could not withstand the assault on his lungs. Torrente, younger and healthier, survived longer. But sealed inside a room designed to be impenetrable, neither had any path to escape. By the time rescuers finally reached them, more than 2 hours after the fire began, both had suffocated. Lily Safra survived because she was on the opposite side of the residence. She made her way to a balcony and was rescued by firefighters who reached her section of the building while the search for phantom intruders continued elsewhere. The video footage from security cameras that might have documented exactly what happened that night was never recovered. The bodyguards who normally patrolled the residence had been given the evening off. Samuel Cohen, Safra's personal security chief, had determined that no guards were needed. These details would fuel years of speculation about whether Ted Maher had truly acted alone. 4 days after the fire, on December 7th, Monaco's chief prosecutor announced that Maher had confessed. There had been no intruders. The stab wounds were self-inflicted. The entire scenario had been fabricated by a nurse who wanted to impress his employer and feared losing his position. Prosecutor Daniel Serde told reporters that Maher had started the fire to draw attention to himself because he was jealous of the other nurses on staff. The confession answered one question and raised dozens more. Ted Maher had admitted to starting the fire. He had not admitted to murder. He maintained then, and would continue to maintain for decades afterward, that he never meant to kill anyone. The fire was only supposed to be small. The rescue was supposed to be swift. Everything that went wrong resulted from circumstances he could not have foreseen. Whether that mattered, legally or morally, would be determined at trial. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. Ted Maher spent nearly 3 years in a Monaco jail cell before his case came to trial. The Principality's legal system moved slowly, and the complexity of the case demanded extensive investigation. Maher remained in custody from December 1999, when he was arrested, until November 2002, when proceedings finally began. During those years of pre-trial detention, the outside world moved on. The HSBC deal closed. Lily Safra collected her inheritance and began her transformation into one of the world's most prominent philanthropists. The building on Avenue d'Ostende was repaired and resumed its quiet existence among Monaco's elite addresses. Inside his cell, Maher waited. The trial that followed became a sensation. Nice Matin, the French Riviera's leading newspaper, dubbed it Monaco's trial of the century. International media descended on the tiny principality, drawn by the combination of enormous wealth, violent death, and unanswered questions that had surrounded the case from the beginning. Edmond Safra had been one of the world's richest men. His nurse had killed him. But the circumstances remained strange enough to sustain endless speculation. American attorney Michael Griffith volunteered to assist with the defense. Griffith had previously represented Billy Hayes, the American whose escape from a Turkish prison inspired the film Midnight Express. He understood how to defend clients trapped in foreign legal systems, and he believed Maher's case offered genuine grounds for mitigation. The defense strategy was straightforward. Yes, Ted Maher had started the blaze. No, he had not meant to kill anyone. His actions were stupid, reckless, and deeply misguided, but they were not murder. The deaths resulted from a cascade of failures that extended far beyond one man's bad decisions. The rescue operation had been catastrophically delayed. The police had detained Safra's own security chief. Firefighters had been held back while officers searched for attackers who existed only in Maher's fabrication. Griffith argued that his client was guilty of involuntary manslaughter at most, not arson resulting in death. The distinction mattered. A manslaughter conviction would mean a shorter sentence. The charge Maher faced carried a potential life term. Lawyers representing Lily Safra argued otherwise. They insisted that Maher should be judged by his actions, not his intentions. He had started a blaze in a building where people were sleeping. 2 of those people had died. Whatever he claimed to have been thinking at the time was irrelevant. The consequences were what mattered. The prosecution requested 12 years. Writer Dominic Dunn, who had followed the case closely and written about it for Vanity Fair, attended the proceedings. He watched Maher's courtroom behavior and found it disturbing. The defendant's demeanor struck him as erratic, without remorse, disconnected from the gravity of what had occurred. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict, guilty of arson leading to the deaths of 2 people. The sentence was 10 years. Maher received less than the prosecution had requested, but far more than the defense had hoped. He would serve his time in Monaco's prison system, a facility designed for short-term detention that would become his home for the better part of a decade. 2 months later, he escaped. Using tools he had somehow acquired, Maher cut through the bars of his cell. He fashioned a rope from trash bags and climbed out of the building. He made it 15 miles to Nice before police recaptured him 7 hours after his escape. From France, he called his wife Heidi. According to her account, he said, "It's me, Ted. I'm out. I'm proving how stupid they all are." The escape added time to his sentence and eliminated whatever sympathy might have remained for him. Heidi Maher, who had spent years advocating for her husband's release, began to distance herself. In interviews, she expressed exhaustion and disillusionment. She was coming to believe that the man she had married was not the man she had thought he was. Ted Maher was released in October 2007, having served approximately 8 years. He returned to the United States and attempted to rebuild his life. The effort did not go well. His nursing license was revoked after authorities discovered he had concealed his Monaco conviction on applications. He lost employment repeatedly, as the publicity surrounding his case made it impossible to escape his past. In 2021, he published a book titled Framed in Monte Carlo, in which he maintained his innocence and argued that powerful forces had conspired against him. The book received modest attention from true crime enthusiasts, but did not change his circumstances. What happened next suggested that Ted Maher had learned nothing from the catastrophe he had created in 1999. In 2022, using the name John Green, he was arrested in Texas on charges including burglary, larceny, and fraud, related to a woman named Kim Lark, whom he had been dating. The following year, while incarcerated, he was charged with something far worse. Prosecutors alleged that Maher had conspired with a fellow inmate to murder Kim Lark. The plan, according to court documents, involved bonding the other man out of jail so he could kill her via fentanyl overdose and steal money they believed she had hidden. In March 2025, Maher was found guilty of solicitation to commit murder. In July, he received the maximum sentence, 9 years in prison. The man who had insisted for decades that he never meant to harm anyone was now a convicted killer, sentenced for plotting to murder a woman who had trusted him. Ted Maher was 67 years old when the verdict came down, the same age Edmund Safra had been when he died. Chapter 10. Unanswered Questions. The official story was simple. Ted Maher, A troubled nurse seeking validation staged a fake emergency that spiraled beyond his control. 2 people died because of his recklessness. Justice was served. Many people accepted this conclusion. Others found it difficult to believe. Their doubts began with timing. Edmund Safra had spent decades navigating dangerous waters without incident. He had survived the American Express vendetta. He had weathered whatever consequences came from providing information to the FBI about Russian money laundering. He was weeks away from completing a $10 billion transaction that would have allowed him to vanish into protected retirement, beyond the reach of anyone who might wish him harm. And then, in those final weeks, he died. The man responsible had worked for him for less than 5 months. Ted Maher had no prior connection to any of Safra's enemies. He had no history of violence. His motive, according to prosecutors, was nothing more than a pathetic desire for recognition. He wanted to be a hero. Instead, he became a killer. For those inclined to see patterns, the scenario invited suspicion. The Russian theory proved the most persistent. Safra had contacted American authorities in 1998 with information about suspicious financial flows involving billions of dollars and Kremlin-connected figures. He had made himself a threat to people who eliminated threats professionally. The networks he had exposed operated beyond the reach of Western law enforcement and answered to men who considered murder a routine business expense. Could Ted Maher have been recruited without fully understanding what he was agreeing to? Could someone have suggested the hero scheme to him, knowing how it would likely end? Could a man desperate to prove his worth have been manipulated into destroying himself along with his target? No evidence emerged to support this theory, but the timing was suggestive, and the Russian networks that Safra had helped expose were certainly capable of arranging exactly such an outcome. Suspicions surrounding Lily Safra proved equally durable. She had been married to Edmund for 23 years. She stood to inherit a substantial portion of his estate. Her second husband had died under circumstances that his family still disputed decades later. And on the night her third wealthy husband perished, several details seemed difficult to explain. Lily occupied a separate suite on the opposite end of the residence. This arrangement was practical, given Edmund's medical needs, but it also meant she was positioned to escape while he was not. The bodyguards who normally protected the household had been given the evening off. Samuel Cohen, the security chief, had determined that no guards were necessary. Video footage from the security cameras that might have documented what happened was not recovered. None of this proved anything. Wealthy couples often maintain separate quarters. Security arrangements change for legitimate reasons. Equipment malfunctions. The absence of evidence is not evidence of wrongdoing, but the suspicions lingered. Edmund Safra's surviving brothers issued a carefully worded statement after the verdict. They did not accuse anyone directly. They did not endorse the prosecution's conclusion. What they said was this: each know what they did and did not do. They must now live the rest of their lives with this knowledge. The phrasing suggested that the family believed others shared responsibility for what had happened. Whether they meant the Monaco authorities, Safra's security personnel, or someone closer to home, they did not specify. The rescue operation itself raised concerns that were not adequately addressed. Police arrived within minutes of being alerted. Yet more than 2 hours passed before anyone reached the room where Safra and Vivian Torrente were trapped. Officers detained the one person who could have guided them directly to the victims. Firefighters were held back while the building was cleared for threats that did not exist. Every decision seemed designed to maximize delay rather than minimize it. Incompetence could explain this. Monaco was not accustomed to violent crime. Its emergency services had little experience with scenarios involving armed intruders in fortified residences. When confronted with Maher's fabricated story, they followed protocols that made sense for a hostage situation, but proved catastrophic for a rescue operation. Or the delays served another purpose entirely. Writer Dominic Dunn, who investigated the case extensively for Vanity Fair, did not accept the prosecution's version. He found Maher's behavior strange enough to suggest mental instability, but was troubled by the larger picture. Too many powerful people had reasons to want Edmund Safra dead. Too many convenient circumstances aligned on the night he died. Dunn reportedly received information suggesting that bullets had been found in Safra's body, though this was not confirmed and contradicted the established cause of death. Whether the claim had any basis in fact, or represented the kind of rumor that accumulates around sensational cases, it added another layer to the mystery. 25 years later, resolution remains elusive. Ted Maher maintains that he was framed, that forces beyond his understanding orchestrated events to make him the perfect scapegoat. His subsequent behavior, including his conviction for plotting to murder a woman who trusted him, has not enhanced his credibility. But a guilty man can still tell partial truths, and the circumstances of Edmund Safra's death contain enough anomalies to sustain reasonable doubt. The most honest assessment is this: we do not know what really happened in Monaco on December 3rd, 1999. We know that Ted Maher started a blaze. We know that 2 people died. We know that the man convicted of causing those deaths has spent the decades since demonstrating a pattern of deception and manipulation. Beyond that, certainty dissolves into speculation. Perhaps Maher acted alone, exactly as prosecutors described, and the suspicious circumstances were nothing more than coincidence. Perhaps he was manipulated by forces he has not identified and still does not understand. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between these possibilities, in a territory where individual recklessness intersected with larger agendas in ways that cannot be fully reconstructed. Edmund Safra built his fortune on discretion. The secrets he kept died with him. What happened that night in Monaco may not be resolved in our lifetimes. Chapter 11. Legacy. Edmund Safra left half of his estate to charity. The Edmund J. Safra Philanthropic Foundation, established after his death, has distributed hundreds of millions of dollars to causes he supported during his lifetime. Medical research, education, Jewish cultural preservation, humanitarian relief. The foundation bearing his name operates across more than 40 countries, funding hospitals, universities, and community organizations that will outlast everyone who remembers the circumstances of his death. His widow devoted the remainder of her life to expanding this work. Lily Safra inherited an estimated $800 million and spent the next 2 decades giving most of it away. She endowed the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics at Harvard University. She funded the Edmund and Lily Safra Children's Hospital at Sheba Medical Center near Tel Aviv, which treats thousands of young patients each year. She established the Edmund and Lily Safra International Institute for Neuroscience in Brazil. She built the Edmund J. Safra Family Lodge at the National Institutes of Health, providing housing for patients and families seeking treatment. By the time of her death in July 2022, she had donated more than $1 billion to charitable causes worldwide. The whispers about her past followed her to the end. They did not stop her. Whether Lily Safra was a grieving widow who transformed tragedy into philanthropy, or something more complicated, she built institutions that will educate students, heal patients, and advance research for generations. The hospitals do not care about the rumors. The scholars receiving fellowships do not investigate the source of their funding. Whatever suspicions surround her life, the concrete achievements of her giving are beyond dispute. The Safra banking dynasty continues without Edmund. His brothers Joseph and Moise, who built parallel financial empires in Brazil and elsewhere, maintained the family tradition. Safra National Bank of New York, J. Safra Saracen in Switzerland, Banco Safra in Brazil. The name still appears on institutions managing hundreds of billions in assets. The family that began financing caravans in Ottoman Syria now operates one of the largest private banking networks in the world. Edmund did not live to see this expansion, but the principles he established, discretion, reliability, personal relationships, remain embedded in how the family does business. The building at 17 Avenue d'Ostende still stands. La Belle Époque was repaired after the blaze that destroyed its upper floors. New residents occupy the space where Edmund and Lily once lived. The mansard roof that burned on December 3rd, 1999 has been replaced. Tourists walking past on their way to the casino or the harbour have no reason to know what happened there, unless they remember the headlines from a quarter-century ago. Monaco itself has moved on. The principality that was so shaken by violence in its midst has returned to its usual concerns: wealth management, yacht registrations, the business of serving the very rich. The Safra case was an aberration. Nothing like it has happened since. Ted Ma sits in an American prison. The man who started this story's final chapter is now 67 years old, the same age Edmund Safra was when he died. Maher is serving 9 years for plotting to murder a woman who trusted him, his second conviction for actions that endangered or ended lives. He maintains his innocence in the Safra case. He published a book. He gave interviews. None of it changed his circumstances or his reputation. His trajectory suggests a pattern that the Monaco court may have recognized more clearly than observers at the time. Ted Maher was not a criminal mastermind or a hired assassin. He was something perhaps more dangerous, a man whose craving for recognition exceeded his capacity for judgment, whose fantasies about heroism led him to acts that destroyed others and ultimately himself. Whether larger forces exploited this vulnerability remains an open matter. The answer may not comfort the dead. In December 2025, Netflix releases a documentary examining the case. 26 years after Edmund Safra suffocated in his bathroom, audiences will watch dramatizations of the events, hear interviews with witnesses and investigators, and form their own conclusions about what really happened. The timing is deliberate. True crime content draws viewers. Wealthy victims and mysterious circumstances draw even more. The streaming platform understands that some stories retain their power regardless of how many times they are told. This is one of those stories. A billionaire who trusted almost no one. A fortress that became a tomb. A nurse who wanted to be a hero. A rescue that arrived too late. A widow who inherited everything. Brothers who believe others share the blame. Mysteries that may outlast everyone who might solve them. Edmund Safra spent his life protecting wealth. In the end, all his precautions failed. The walls he built to keep danger out trapped him with danger he had invited inside. The smoke that killed him has long since cleared. The mysteries remain. Edmund Safra was one of the richest men in the world. He built his fortune on trust, his reputation on discretion, his safety on walls that no enemy could penetrate. He surrounded himself with guards, cameras, armored doors, and reinforced rooms designed to withstand any assault. He understood that wealth attracts danger, and he spent decades preparing for threats he could imagine. The threat that killed him was one he invited inside: a nurse, a nobody, a man so desperate for approval that he set a small blaze to make himself look heroic. The plan was pathetic. The consequences were catastrophic. And whether Ted Ma acted alone or served as someone's instrument, The result was the same. Edmund Safra, who trusted almost no one, trusted the wrong person. His widow became a philanthropist. His killer became a convict. His brothers continued the family business. His name adorns hospitals and research centers on 4 continents. The building where he died still stands on the Monaco waterfront, its new roof gleaming in the Mediterranean sun. The man himself is gone. The questions about how he died may follow him into history. Some fortunes cannot be protected. Some fortresses cannot hold. Some stories have no satisfying endings. This was one of them.